if you don't see the connection that if you want the freedom that I think a lot of people really desire, that it requires responsibility, if you don't make that connection, you're going to fall into this hedonistic trap where you've been earning it's a hard, stressful job, but you made it to Friday. And now you're just going to indulge in all your vices and your short-term behaviors, and then Monday rolls around. And that is how you get in this cycle of mediocrity. Welcome back to Purple Elephant Radio. Similar to last episode, I want to start with a reading from my new book, Off With His Head, a short poem that I think will foreshadow the episode quite well. And this one is called Bugging Me. The pollen in the wind made my vision blur. It was springtime. I had let my life defer. But it is summer now, nearly, when the heat is a short-lived boon. I watch the bugs as they buzz, how assured as they fall for false moons. Yet I am not much smarter, even with crystalline eyes. A false light and a true light will wear each one's disguise. So choose well, choose wisely. So I will get into how that poem relates to the episode in just a bit. But if you do have any interest in the book, Off With His Head, it's on sale on Amazon now for $21.50. And that's just one out of 50 plus poems. There's 7 essays included in the book. If you just click the link in the description, you can learn a lot more about what's inside. But I highly recommend checking it out. Today's episode is going to be a fun one, a philosophical episode with immense practical implications. So really what I'm going to be focusing on in today's episode is the intersection of personal freedom and personal responsibility. And where I think those converge is with this idea of whose standards are you following? Who sets the bar for your daily habits, your weekly habits, your goals that you're setting, your goals that you're shooting for, the amount of money that you're trying to make, the amount of money you're saving, all the aspects that we consider short-term or long-term goals, whether that's, pushing out one more set at the gym or something longer term like getting this project finished by this date. All of these things require personal responsibility. But I also understand that a lot of people, whether you're watching the video now and you're one of these people, or just drifting around online, a lot of people have freedom, but no real sense of responsibility. Or rather, personal responsibility. Now, just to back up and define a couple words that I'm going to be using a lot in this episode, I'm going to start by defining responsibility. And it is, in a way, interchangeable with discipline. So, responsibility, especially when it comes to an external figure, it usually means that you are called to answer to someone. Like, it is your responsibility to pay taxes as a citizen of the US. And you can choose not to do it, you can choose to be civilly disobedient, but the fact is, if you don't do this thing, you're going to be punished for it in some form or another. So that is responsibility. If you don't do it, there's a negative consequence for not taking that action. So you can almost think of it as compulsive action or involuntary action. But then there is another side of that, personal responsibility. Personal responsibility is when you are the one creating pain and pleasure based on whether you are achieving the thing you want or not. So you're not having a external figure, whether it's a boss, a teacher, or the government, you're not having those people punish you because you already are setting your standards higher than what they expect. But when I talk about freedom, and again, personal freedom, not political freedom, this implies that you live in a place where you do have freedom of speech, you do have some ability to do what you want with your time. But I think superficially, most people assume personal freedom means I can do what I want when I want with my time. And yes, maybe there are some concessions. If I'm not financially free, financially independent, I may understand, okay, I have to give up some of my time to do some work, but all this paycheck, it's giving me my weekend off, or it's giving me my nights off. So we are basically earning free time. So whatever that space of time in a week, that's my freedom. I can do what I want with this time. But the way I'm defining personal freedom is essentially with three, I know it's going to get a little bit complicated, but three terms, three virtues that I think people really want when they say they want personal freedom, or when they think they are having a level of personal freedom. And that is self-direction, self-motivation, and self-control. Okay, I keep forgetting to actually say how the poem I read relates to the episode as a whole. So in Bugging Me, I talk about a true light versus a false light. Now, a lot of people end up falling into the false light, a lot of the bugs, and we can assume that's a bug zapper. But then the true light would be the moonlight. And so what that basically means is when you're setting a massive goal for yourself, you have to be very, very wise as to whether the goal is something you actually want because you're genuinely curious about it versus doing something because it's trendy, because all your friends are doing it, because everyone around you is saying, oh, you'd be good at that thing, regardless of the fact that maybe you don't have any interest in it. So just be cautious about that. Do you really want to be a millionaire? Or is that what all the self-development teachers say that's a good goal to set? Do you really want to be a lawyer? Or is that just what everyone in your family is saying you should do? Back to the episode. So self-direction you can think of as your North Star point. It's the goal that you get to choose for yourself. You are free to choose any number of goals, any things you want to strive for. And you pick that thing and you say, okay, I'm going to stick with it. Self-control, that is going to be the thing that says, okay, I have this goal set. There are a lot of short-term pleasures that I could go for, a lot of hedonistic behavior, but I'm going to choose not to go for those things because I want that longer-term goal. And a lot of people have self-control, at least to some degree, because it also relates to your emotional states. I mean, most people, when they're angry, no matter how angry they are, they're not going to literally punch a wall. So you can also think of self-control as your ability to control your behaviors regardless of your thought patterns or your emotional state. And then there's self-motivation. Now, self-motivation, that's an easy one. That basically says, I have my goal, I have some level of self-control, now I just need to do the thing. I just need to keep taking step after step, eat the huge elephant one bite at a time. So self-direction, big picture thinking. Self-control you can think of as subtractive, ignoring or disregarding the hedonistic short-term pleasures. And then self-motivation is the in the moment, present moment thing that says, I have my big goal, I want to go for it one step at a time. The reason I think most people actually want that, even if that's not how they define freedom or personal freedom, they actually want that because that is what gives the most satisfaction in life. If you have self-control, if you have self-direction, if you have self-motivation, you are the one who's going to do big things in this world. Whether that means starting your own company, becoming very wealthy in some form or another, whether that means becoming an artist that is extremely well known, or some athlete or some star in some form or another, all those things assume that you have a level of personal freedom to act on those things. And maybe you can already see where I'm getting at, but to get those things, to get those big goals, and I should also mention a musician who can play and write any song they want on their guitar. All those things require responsibility, personal responsibility, discipline. Again, I'm using those kind of interchangeably. So it's really important to see that you can't have the freedom you really want unless you are willing to take on some level of responsibility. Now, let me just give a quick thought experiment, something that you can probably think about in your own life, something you actually experienced, just to really cement this point home. Now, let's imagine it's Friday, you just got off work, you have the whole weekend to yourself. You are free. You have freedom in the superficial sense. what is the first thing you're going to do with your freedom? If you're like a lot of people, you're either going to pull out your phone, check Instagram, check Facebook, check Twitter/X, check any number of the social media platforms, or you're going to, boom, click on your TV, watch Netflix, watch HBO, watch Hulu until the night is over. What I'm getting at is that you can have freedom, but if you don't also have a level of responsibility, being responsible to yourself, you're just going to indulge in your base hedonistic impulses. So really think about that. Because it's not enough to just take my word for what I'm saying. If you don't see the connection that if you want the freedom that I think a lot of people really desire, that it requires responsibility, if you don't make that connection, you're going to fall into this hedonistic trap where you've been earning it's a hard, stressful job, but you made it to Friday. And now you're just going to indulge in all your vices and your short-term behaviors, and then Monday rolls around. And that is how you get in this cycle of mediocrity. And I'm sorry, no offense if that is your lifestyle right now. I mean, in some ways, I do indulge in, short-term pleasures, but the goal shouldn't be to settle there. And again, you can come to your own conclusion on this. I think it's self-evident that the point of life is not to go through that type of cycle. But again, that's something that you can figure out for yourself. I would hope the person watching this video wants something more out of life. But so I think I've made a clear case for why responsibility and freedom are inseparable. And actually, you can think about it this way. You need responsibility before you can have personal freedom. So responsibility is actually the first thing. Because most people are granted political freedom just as a result of being born in a certain country. So because of that, most people think, I'm politically free. They do some mental gymnastics. Okay, I'm free in every sense. It's not really true. But to get that level of freedom that I mentioned, where you have control over your actions and actual control over your thoughts and emotions, that requires responsibility and discipline. I think a good follow-up point from here is, what are some rebuttals to this? As in, what if I don't want to be personally responsible? What if I don't want all that responsibility? What if my boss is already breathing down my neck and my professor is assigning homework assignment after homework assignment? I just don't have enough time to be personally responsible. I've got enough people expecting things from me. Is that a response that might pop up in your head? To that, I would say the person who sets the highest standards for you is the one that you follow. And so if you choose to set your standards higher than anyone around you, just to give an easy example for this, what time you wake up. If you have to get to work at 8 a.m., maybe you wake up at 7:30, grab some crappy breakfast and go to work. Or maybe because you set your standards higher than the people around you, you wake up at 6 a.m. and go on a run and get a little bit of journaling done and meditate, and then you go into the office. So that is just a very easy difference between, the standard is on what time you wake up. The person who sets the higher, better standard, the more difficult standard, that is the one that you follow. So I think what I'd like to explain is, if you really are in that state of, I feel like I don't need to take on personal responsibility because I've got so many other people who I'm responsible to. There's an actual danger in that. And I don't mean like you're going to be physically harmed, but I mean like a psychological danger in only being responsible to other people and not to yourself. Where the danger actually stems is that people who don't have, say, a very well-tuned moral compass, but have a level of personal responsibility, personal freedom, those are the people who can lead a lot of people, who can create propaganda, literal propaganda, or marketing campaigns, and control the masses. And I don't mean that in a conspiratorial sense, But I mean that if you don't have personal responsibility, if you're not setting your own standards, you're just going to follow who is the most persuasive. Sometimes the most persuasive person in the room is a dangerous person who doesn't care about you, who would like you to be a useful idiot for their ideology, their ideal that they're trying to spread, their utopian vision. I hope you see what I'm getting at. Is that the person without personal responsibility, that is the one who is going to be sort of the sleepwalker in the world of constant media overload, constant, an ad everywhere you look. That is a person that is going to be susceptible to all that stuff. And maybe you don't care. But when I think about it that way, I do not want to be that person. But it's not just that. Someone may have enough responsibility, enough discipline to say, I'm not going to get sucked into the fast food commercials that I see between Hulu shows. I know that I'm going to eat healthy. And, they have some level of standards in their life. But there's another thing, something that's a little bit more insidious, harder to spot. And it's this idea that I just recently have coined, but calling it intellectual fly-on-the-wallism. And that is when you watch YouTube, Instagram Reels, TikTok, podcasts, clips, or full episodes, educational, informational content, thinking that you're doing yourself a favor. But really, it is just another form of entertainment, another form of scratching some short-term hedonistic itch. I mean, all things considered, if you were watching a self-improvement video, that is better than watching, the Kardashians' reality TV show. I'm willing to make that argument. But there's a step that you need to go beyond that. It is so easy to fall into the either intellectual or self-help black hole. We're watching video after video, similar topic, talking about it in just a slightly different way. Hearing 3 tips to blank, 5 tips to blank, 6 tips to blank. Ooh, maybe I haven't heard that last tip. It's useful for a little bit. But you have to become aware of when it's no longer useful. You're not really learning that much new stuff, but it's just a distraction for taking action in your actual life. You've got to be honest about that. It's been something that's been a little bit hard for me to admit, but I'm absolutely caught in that spider's web of a trap right now. And to be fair, I do think a lot of people have somewhat of a hybrid approach. I think this is where I'm at in my life right now, where I'm able to take action, make content, write stories, but I still do spend a good chunk of time doing that intellectual fly-on-the-wallism, where I'm listening to debates, listening to podcasts. So I don't want to paint it like a black and white thing. I do think that the ultimate goal should be to, if not move away from it, looking for longer form content. Stuff that is not the 30-second sound bites, 60-second sound bites. Because that is a very surface level, shallow form of education. So to distill the point, why develop personal responsibility when you live in a free country? When there are tons of people already asking you to do this and that thing, already setting standards for you? Why set the standards? Why set the bar even higher? And the reason is simple. And maybe this will motivate you, maybe it will not. Because if you don't set standards yourself, gravity will win. What do I mean by that? I mean, life is hard. Life is difficult. Life, in a lot of ways, it feels like it's beating up on you, pulling you down. And you, as an autonomous individual, you are the only one that can climb against gravity. Because it is so easy to be on social media, to, turn on the TV, to indulge in fast food and sugar. And of course, you're going to, sometimes fail and slip up and indulge in those things. But the question is, do you brush yourself off and keep climbing? Or do you wallow in the gravity? Do you let your bones atrophy? Do you lay flat on the ground and not try to get up? Because if you are that type of person, I'm sorry, but that is not the person I want to spend time with. That is not a person I want to be around. And that's different from saying life is hard. It's the person who knows life is hard, but doesn't try to fight back. I think the best way to think about it is you're always going to be responsible to someone. And if you don't set your own standards, you will end up falling into this gravity is the person with the highest standards around you. And sometimes they're benevolent. Sometimes it's a mentor who wants to see you improve. But more often, it's someone who doesn't really care what's going on with you. That they've got their own goals because they're autonomous, they have self-control, and they will get your help, and then they will, not kick you to the curb, but they're not focused on your improvement. They're not focused on seeing you grow. So I know I'm talking in broad, sweeping generalities, but just ask yourself how that relates to your life. To close this video up, I want to offer a few questions and lay out what I would consider is a metaphor, a strategy to move forward from here. To really bring together the freedom that you actually want. Not just the surface level understanding of freedom where I'm born in a free country, so I'm free. Not that. But self-control, self-motivation, and self-direction. To get there, it does require responsibility. I would actually argue that responsibility is needed first to cultivate those virtues. Discipline is needed first, and then and then freedom arises out of that. So, how do we get there? Well, I like this metaphor of thinking about developing your sails. And so, in the metaphor of boats and the ocean, we can think of the ocean as the vast sweep of humanity that they're all doing their own thing. They don't necessarily care where your boat is or what's going on. It's the chaos of the external world. Then you have the wind, which I'm defining as your internal desires, your internal base pleasures. So there is the urge to eat chocolate, eat candy. There is the urge to check your phone, scroll through Instagram mindlessly. There is the urge to turn on Netflix and just veg out for the night. But I would also say within the wind, so there's the base pleasures, but there's also your curiosities, your natural inclinations, the things that you would want to be doing that you said when you were 7, I want to be a director, I want to be a writer, I want to be a musician, etc., etc. So there are whispers, but within the wind, you can find your natural passions. And then what is the sail? The sail is how you cultivate your basic passions, your rising and falling emotional states, and use it to go towards the island, the place you actually want to go, your final goal in the external world. And I say final, but just, one goal out of many. So the way to develop your sail, I would argue, is through learning about yourself, understanding yourself. Because we live in a world where online so many people are saying, follow your passion, do this thing, do that thing, look at this niche, look at this trending sound. So it's a mix of vague self-help advice and just trendy BS that's going to fall away within a week or two. If you want to be an individual, be an autonomous, self-controlled individual who controls their own destiny, then you have to stop listening to that stuff and instead look inward. What am I curious about? What do I want to learn more about? What do I want to do? What seems interesting to me? What do I care about? What do I want to see grow? What do I want to help build and improve? I can't answer those for you. I can answer them for myself. But you have to sit down and ask yourself. Just as a very brief side note, I was talking to my girlfriend the other day, and she was saying how, this is not a slight on her, but she'll go on Instagram Reels and find herself inspired by some art videos, some art Instagram Reels. Oh, this is an interesting technique, etc., etc. What I heard in her story of that, of explaining it, was that there was no choosing the video that she was watching. She was letting the information come to her. I'm saying that personal freedom, the one that involves a sense of responsibility, that requires that you are first being patient with yourself, second, asking yourself what you actually want to know more about, and then doing research, then finding information, then consuming content. So way back when I had written somewhat of a book called The Purple Elephant Artist, and the way I broke that down was think, consume, create, become. And so I think that still holds true even now. You have to think about what you want. You have to think about what you're curious about. You won't stumble upon it. Of course, you'll stumble upon something, but it will be what someone else is curious about. It will be what other people want you to think about. You have to start in this space of quietness, of inner stillness, before you figure out what is your mind naturally gravitating towards. Then you have to consume. Yes, then you get the fun part, the stuff that most people are doing all the time, just unconsciously. You get to research, join communities, talk to people in, whether it's an industry or doing that type of art or making that kind of thing. You get to engage in consuming the information. And then create. Now it's your turn. Now you get to bring something new to the table. But again, it requires that you're not just being hyperstimulated with what other people are doing, but rather taking breaks between research, stillness, learn more about stuff, stillness. So oscillating between the two. That's how you create. Because ultimately, creativity comes out of an empty mind, out of no thought. And then the final thing, become. At some point, there is probably an arbitrary point, but where the aspiring writer becomes an author, where the aspiring podcaster becomes a podcaster, where you're not trying to do the thing, but you are doing the thing. And that's when momentum has taken hold. And from there, all that is required of you is to be conscientious. Just ask yourself, am I still doing this thing because I want to, or am I just feeling like I'm stuck in this sunk cost and I don't want to escape it because I put so much time into it? So, a lot in this episode. I'm going to try to edit this down as best I can, but I hope you got something out of it. And the ultimate point I want to make is that you can't have the freedom you desire without personal responsibility. It's up to you, not anyone else, not someone breathing down your neck and saying you need to do this or that because you'll be punished if not, but because you understand the punishment. Because ultimately, personal responsibility means if you don't do that thing, gravity wins. You have given up. And I don't think there's anything more sad in life than giving up. Thank you for watching. If you like this episode, it would mean a hell of a lot if you rated it on Spotify, on iTunes, left a nice review. Thank you.